that time again. NFL Draft, it's finally here.
Yes.
It is April 30th, round 1 of the NFL Draft tonight. It starts at 8. I am Dan Labbe. He's Chris Fedor. And whatever happens tonight, Chris, it's going to be exciting for the Browns because, again, they've got 2 first-round draft picks. We've seen that before with this team. It hasn't always gone well. Of course, Marcus Mariota's in play. Maybe the Titans take him at 2. Maybe they pass. What if he starts to drop? There's a lot that can happen early in that draft. So we have a packed show for you from now until the final pick of the first round. We will be with you. Of course, you'll also break down all of the picks as we go along, Browns related or not. So you want to stay tuned for that. It'll all be right here. Jump in the comments and let us know what you think as the draft goes along. Call us names, whatever you want. We'll read along as we go. We want you to be involved in the show, of course, as well. And on occasion, we're going to even talk to Bud Shaw as we go along in the draft. He just walked in here to the studio, so he's getting ready to make his appearance, or his first appearance on our draft coverage. What is this, year number 3?
Yeah, I think it's 3. Yeah, I think that's right.
All right. Browns first pick, if they stay at 12, sometime after 9 o'clock. So stick with us, make comments. But first, let's get to our guests. We're going to have a few here between 7 and 8. Mary Kay Cabot will be on. Terry Pluto will be on. Doug Maurice will be on. But our first guest, part of our Browns reporting team, Tom Reed. He's in Berea. Tom, how are you? Good, Tom. All right. I mean, look, the question on everyone's mind, and I think you're kind of in the camp of don't do it, but the question on everyone's mind is, do the Browns move up to get Marcus Mariota?
They might. I never, since the end of the season, I never thought that they wouldn't make a run at it. This comes as no surprise. Even if they end up picking at 12, I don't think it will be for lack of trying to make a move. I think it's going to just come down to it. They certainly have the ammunition. It's just a matter of how much ammunition they want to give up for him. If it happens to be a first-round pick, that's a lot of assets to put into one player like that.
Tom, when you think about the Browns and their goals tonight, they've got pick number 12, they've got pick number 19. Of course, tomorrow they've got the high second-round pick. If you're GM Ray Farmer and you're setting your game plan of the things that you want to accomplish, what would you say is number 1 on that list? Is it quarterback?
Well, again, if they can make a move, I mean, if they somehow could get Mariota for 12 and 19 and maybe, I don't know, what is third-round pick or something like that the following year. That doesn't sound like it's enough to do it, but would you do that? Well, yeah, that's a lot different to me than the 12 and 19 or a second first round. Of course, this franchise has to get a quarterback at some point. It's just a matter again of how much you want to give up, and will we see another team do what Washington did a couple years ago with RG3? That's the last time we've seen something like that happen. And we know how that turned out. And then after that, Chris, I think you were hoping last year to get a couple of starters, and you didn't get them. You want to get guys that can impact the team right away if you don't get that quarterback. I think you're hoping to get 2 starters at places of need.
Let's get down to that. The 2 starters. Danny Shelton, a name that's come up. Devontae Parker, a name that's come up at 12. Are there other guys you're watching at number 12?
I would love to see them get a guy like Devontae Parker at 12. I ended up going with Danny Shelton in my mock draft and then Perry at 19, but if they could somehow get Devontae Parker and Shelton at 12 and 19, which I don't think is completely out of the question, I think that would be a very good draft. Or they could, if they could get an outside linebacker in there in one of those 2 spots. There's a couple things they can do there. And, I think that they can come out with a couple of really good players. I would like to see them get a decent receiver out of here and either the run stopper or an outside linebacker.
Tom, when you talk about the number 19 pick, that seems to be the one that is a little bit tougher to peg. And that's where the rumors start to come in about Sam Bradford and the Philadelphia Eagles. If you're making the call, do you think Sam Bradford is worth number 19 overall?
Well, I think it's going to be 12, right? I don't think 19. If they ended up making that trade, you're talking about the trade to maybe so they can move up, so the Eagles can move up to get Mariota?
Possibly, yeah. 12 or 19.
I don't think 19 does it. I think they'd almost have to use that number 12 pick in that deal. because, I think 19 and 20 doesn't get it. I don't think that gets it for the Titans. As far as, let's just go on with the if it were the 12th pick, you would have to have, in my opinion, some kind of guarantee from Sam Bradford that he wants to be here. I can't give up a number 12 pick for a guy already who's injured, who's had just a star-crossed career with injuries, and I guess we've never heard from his mouth, but the idea that it keeps floating out there that he does not want to sign here. So you're going to trade the number 12 pick in the draft for a guy who's a rental, basically, a 16-game rental. I mean, I guess if he had a good season, you could franchise him and keep him for a year. But boy, that's a lot of money if you can't get that done. And I think that's a deal that if they wanted to do it, that's a deal they should have been able to get done a while back, where they had a chance to talk to Bradford and say, look, we'd love to have you if you want to come, but we need some kind of commitment from you that you're going to stay here at the end of the season.
Tom, you had your final mock draft come out. What did you have at 12? What did you have at 19?
Shelton and Perriman. I like Danny Shelton a lot. If he was there at 19, I'd like it a lot better. Again, my dream scenario for the Browns would be Parker at 12 and Shelton at 19. Perriman is kind of a guy that's all over the board. I've seen him, in some mocks as high as like 10, 11, and other ones, at the bottom of the first round. So I don't think anyone really has a great consensus on him. The issue I think with him is the drops. What I like about him is he averages over 20 yards a catch, and he's done it with two different quarterbacks the last 2 years, obviously, because Blake Bortles would have been his quarterback 2 years ago. But, that 19 pick is a really, really tough one there.
Tom, if you're talking about tonight's pick, obviously quarterback could be in play for the Browns, and they've got 2 first-rounders, 12 and 19. Is Ray Farmer making the pick, do you think?
You would hope so. You would hope that lessons were learned last year, and hopefully the general manager is going to be the guy that makes that call. And you hope that the big thing is you just hope they're prepared for anything. That they've gone. I'm sure these guys go over all the scenarios, and you would hope that they would be very prepared for whatever scenario pops up. You would hope that Ray's making the call this time.
All right, that's Tom Reed. He will be in Berea, of course, tonight, tomorrow, Saturday. A busy 3 days coming for you, Tom. So we appreciate you taking the time to join us here.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right. That was an interesting question, Ray Farmer making the pick, because obviously there is the talk that maybe Ray Farmer wasn't the guy who drafted Johnny Manziel. He did, but he didn't. He wasn't the guy behind it. It'll be interesting to see if there's any of those kind of head-turning picks that make you think, wait a minute, was this Ray, or was this the owner coming down and saying, make this pick? Although I'd like to think that maybe Jimmy Haslam has learned some things over the last year.
You would hope so. But Dan, if we're talking about a quarterback, the owner's going to want to get involved. And it happens everywhere. Look, for Tampa Bay's picking at number 1, Tennessee's picking at 2. The owner's going to have some kind of say in both of those decisions. Just like Jimmy Haslam's going to have some kind of say in the Browns' decision tonight. It's just a matter of how much. And I'm hoping what I would want from an owner, and I think what every fan should want from an owner, is that owner lets the football guys, the guys that he hired to make those football decisions, make those football decisions.
Although, let me say this. If the move is to go get Marcus Mariota.
Oh, boy.
If you're the owner, aren't you then essentially committing to this regime, the people you've put in place beyond next season, maybe 2, maybe 3 years down the road? If you're going to make that move to go get Mariota, of course, with Mike Pettin and Ray Farmer and everyone else signing on, you almost have to commit to those guys, because what are you going to do? Fire them, and then they might look at this guy that you traded 3 picks for, 4 picks for, and say, you know what, he doesn't fit what we want to do.
That's the danger with Marcus Mariota, to be honest with you, and that's why there's a part of me, Dan, going into tonight, I'm starting to think that it might be more likely for this regime to go with Sam Bradford. Mike Pettin went 7-9 last year, lost 5 straight games to finish the year. Ray Farmer on his resume, whether it was Jimmy Haslam or not, Ray Farmer on his resume, 2 busts so far in the first round. And I know it's nice and early, but Justin Gilbert had a hard time getting on the field last year, and Johnny Manziel looked like a kid who won a raffle to play quarterback for a day in the NFL. That's how he looked, and that's on Ray Farmer's resume. So if that's the case, he might be thinking, hey, I got to win. I got to get some wins on the resume. And Sam Bradford is more of a known commodity than Marcus Mariota. There are so many questions about not Marcus Mariota, can he stay healthy or things like that. It's, can the guy even play? Can he huddle? He hasn't been in a huddle since high school. Can he take snaps from under center? At least with Sam Bradford, yeah, you got the injuries, and that's risky. But at least you know he can play. You've seen it before.
It's true. The other thing, too, I mean, you look at those 2 picks. I mean, I think there's still hope for a guy like Justin Gilbert. You look at Justin Gilbert and you see some physical skills. You see the size. You see the physicality. I don't know if it's going to work for him. You look at Johnny Manziel and what we saw, not just in those 6 quarters, but in the preseason, in training camp, the fact that he couldn't beat out Brian Hoyer in training camp when Brian Hoyer was awful in training camp in the preseason.
Right.
You look at those things and you do start to wonder, does he even have, forget the off-the-field stuff, which is big. Does he even have the physical tools? Does he have the ability to be an NFL starting quarterback? And everything from last year, from the minute he stepped on the field in training camp until he slept through his, whatever it was, his workout, it said no.
Right. And Joe Hayden's talked positively about Justin Gilbert this offseason, saying he's kind of taken him under his wing. He's taken him down to Florida. They've worked out together. But you're right, when he was out there, Dan, he did look lost. It didn't look like he was back at Oklahoma State and he was using that length and the athleticism and the speed and the quickness to hang with wide receivers. He was spinning around like a top at times, had no clue where he was supposed to be or what the wide receiver was going to do. And he was somebody, Dan, who in college, if you think about Justin Gilbert in college, he got by on that speed and the athleticism. In the NFL, you got to have the instincts, you got to have the focus, you've got to have the technique. You can't just skate by on pure athleticism in the NFL. It's not going to happen.
And then you throw in the off-the-field stuff with him too, and it destroys everything.
Right.
You know, if your life's not in order off the field, things aren't going to be good for you on the field either. We saw that with Gilbert. We saw that with Manziel. Now the plus for Ray Farmer last year, Joel Bitonio,
Yes.
Terrence West,
Right.
Christian Kirksey, Pierre Desir, Isaiah Crowell, not a draft pick, but an unsigned, a rookie signing. Taylor Gabriel, same kind of thing. After that first round, he actually did pretty well, finding guys that, you know, who knows what they're going to be long term, but they're guys that you can put on an NFL roster, and a winning NFL roster. Really.
And now it's up to him with the 2 first-round picks tonight, 12 and 19, to find difference makers. It's good that you're going to round out your roster and you've got guys that can fit in the 53 and they can fit your defense, they can fit your offense. This team needs difference makers. And with the first-round picks, even that high second-round pick, you've got an opportunity here, if you do hang on to all 3, to get 3 guys that can be very, very impactful, not just for this upcoming season or the next season, but you're hoping for the next 7 to 10 years.
You got your best player from last year's draft with that second-round pick. That was huge. I mean, you got a guy who's going to be a guard on your offensive line for a long time.
Yeah.
Not just a guy. He's going to be good. He's a guy who has Pro Bowl potential. You found that in the second round.
Right, and that's interesting that we talk about difference makers right in round 1. I understand the appeal of Danny Shelton. I do. You and I have talked about this. The Browns were dead last year trying to stop the run. Alfred Blue came out of nowhere. He had a career day. Denard Robinson for Jacksonville came out of nowhere, had a career day. Danny Shelton's a guy who's going to play a majority on first and second down, and the most important down in the NFL is third down, and he's not going to be out there. So if you're asking me, Dan, if I've got a choice at number 12, you know, I'm ranking it running back, wide receiver, pass rusher, and then you talk about the run-stuffing defensive tackle, because I just don't think he changes the defense. If you get a pass rusher out there flying off the edge, somebody who can get you double-digit sacks or at least have that threat, going to make Paul Kruger better, going to make the other linebackers better, going to make your cornerbacks better. That's the kind of difference that a pass rusher can make. It's a bigger difference, I think. It's a bigger impact than a run stuffer.
And here's the thing. There's so many needs. You know, it's not just like you're choosing between a run stopper
Right.
and a luxury guy as a pass rusher.
Yeah.
You need a pass rusher.
Right.
You probably need something in that secondary at some point in this draft. You need a wide receiver. You need a quarterback. All of these things are needs on this team. They aren't luxuries. They're things they still need. So if you pass on Danny Shelton for a wide receiver,
Right.
for Devontae Parker or Kevin White or whoever it could be, if you pass on Danny Shelton for a pass rusher,
Right.
you're filling another need. You're not just taking a luxury guy.
Well, the other thing, Dan, that you have to think about is your need has to make sense with the value. Like if you're sitting there at number 12, right, and Dante Fowler's off the board, and Vic Beasley's off the board, and Bud Dupree's off the board because there's this huge run on pass rushers, right? You can't just force it at 12 and say, the heck with it. We're going to take Eli Harold from Virginia. We're going to boost him way up the draft. No, yes, you need a pass rusher. There's no question about it. But it has to match where you're taking that guy.
It could be that Danny Shelton's that guy.
Could be.
When the draft plays out, when we get through 12 picks, it could be that Danny Shelton is the best player who fills the need.
Mm-hmm.
We'll find out. That's why this draft is so interesting. Once you get past Jameis Winston, anything can happen. And I think that's where it gets interesting, too, with Tennessee. Do they want Marcus Mariota? Because they don't have a quarterback.
Right.
They have a guy named Zach Mettenberger.
Mm-hmm.
And all the talk is they believe in him and they think he's the future, but come on. So do they really want Marcus Mariota? And it also raises questions why they want to trade out of that spot.
That's right.
But let's say they go Leonard Williams.
Mm-hmm.
Then all of a sudden you're getting into Jacksonville. You're getting into Oakland, guys who probably aren't going to take Mariota.
Yeah.
And then I think that's where it gets really interesting for the Browns. Because if they don't have something in place with Tennessee already, it's probably not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But if he slides past Tennessee, goes past Jacksonville, goes past Oakland, the Jets start to come into play, maybe trying to move ahead of them, things get very, very interesting, I think, at that point.
And the other thing, if you're Tennessee has been rewarded with the second overall pick because they sucked last year. That's what the NFL wants. They want these bad teams to get good again or get to the average spot.
Yeah.
So they give them the high first-round picks. And here's Tennessee sitting here at 2, and they have a bunch of needs. It's not just quarterback. Sure, they could take Mariota, most important guy in their franchise moving forward, the most important position for them moving forward. Or they could take a defensive lineman, like you said, Leonard Williams from USC. I think he's the best player in the draft. Tennessee was one of the worst teams last year, Dan, in terms of stopping the run. That would make some sense. Amari Cooper from Alabama, Kevin White from West Virginia. All those guys could make sense for Tennessee at 2. Why in the world, if you're the Titans, would you want to move all the way back to number 12? Even if you're getting number 19 as well and a future first-round pick, you want the difference maker. You want the elite talent. You're not finding Leonard Williams at number 12. You're not. You're probably not going to be able to get a guy like Amari Cooper, Kevin White, even Devontae Parker at number 12. So if you're the Titans and you need difference makers, you need impact guys, why would you possibly want to move out of that number 2 spot? I think, Dan, that's why they're asking for the sun, the moon, and the stars, because they understand the value of that pick.
And maybe they know they're not going to take him. Maybe it's all a bluff. They know that they're not going to take Marcus Mariota, like you said. Maybe they want Leonard Williams.
Maybe.
They're going to try and fleece somebody into moving up to that number 2 pick.
Either way, they're doing what they should be doing because they're in the driver's seat. They have the prize. It's either the pick that's going to get somebody Leonard Williams or Amari Cooper or Dante Fowler or Marcus Mariota. And it's a 2-quarterback draft here, folks. It's Jameis Winston, it's Marcus Mariota, and then a bunch of guys who are probably going to be backups or practice squad guys. And Tennessee still does have a need for quarterback. But they're doing exactly what they should be doing. They're in the driver's seat. They have the prize. And if somebody is going to blow them away, the way the Washington Redskins blew away the St. Louis Rams a couple of years ago, then they're probably going to take that package. Otherwise, they're going to sit there at 2. And my guess is, Dan, they're going to take Marcus Mariota. They're going to get their franchise quarterback, and they're going to smile.
All right, we're going to have Doug Maurice coming up on the show here shortly. Then Mary Kay Cabot will join us. Terry Pluto is going to wrap things up in our pre-show here as we approach 8 o'clock. And the first round of the NFL draft, the Browns currently sitting at number 12 and number 19. Jameis Winston, of course, expected to be the number 1 pick for Tampa Bay. And then who knows what's going to happen, like we just talked about. The Browns, a lot of mocks out there. Danny Shelton is a hot name. Devontae Parker, a hot name. Let's go ahead, though, and turn things now to kind of an Ohio State angle and bring in our Ohio State beat reporter, Doug Maurice. Doug, how are you?
Hey, guys.
Doug, Devin Smith, a guy a lot of Browns fans like in that second round. Is he going to be there?
I think he will be. I feel like Devin Smith is absolutely the deep threat that he's talked about. I have questions, as a lot of people do, about him, making the intermediate catches, making the catch on 3rd and 7. It just feels like to me there's so many receiver names out there. I feel like there are going to be other guys that various teams fall in love with. This team likes this guy, this team likes that guy. And I think a lot of people will like Devin Smith, but I'm not sure anyone will love him enough to take him off the board before 43. So I do think the Browns would have a shot at him.
Doug, you've watched Devin Smith in person for his entire career. Give me a rundown. What is he? Where does he need to get better? Why is it that NFL teams would like him?
He goes up and gets those deep balls. If you remember the Wisconsin Big Ten championship game, he helped make Cardale Jones. Not all those throws from Cardale Jones with his huge arm were perfect. But if you have Devin Smith down the field going up for a jump ball with a corner, he's going to win that battle most of the time. He's really good at tracking the ball. Dane Brugler, draft analyst, made a good point. He has good, second burst in his routes that he pulls away from guys at the end. When the ball's in the air or getting ready to be in the air, you don't see corners closing the gap on him. You see Devin Smith pulling away more. Now, is he a complete receiver? I think he has work to do in that. I don't think he's a number one receiver in the NFL. So when people talked about him as a first-round draft pick, I didn't think that sounded right because I don't think you could take him and say, he's our guy. Mm-hmm. But as a complimentary guy, as your second receiver, as your third receiver, there's somebody else you'll throw to on 3rd and 7, but he's going to scare defenses. He will scare defenses. I don't think he's going to make catch after catch throughout a game, but he will scare defenses.
Doug, this is obviously not the year for Ohio State. Next year is the year that a lot of people are watching the Buckeyes. Joey Bosa already kind of a favorite to be a number one pick. Cardale Jones, a lot of people thought Cardale Jones could have been a top 10 guy this year. Who knows, what'll happen if he actually plays next year. But this year, who are the other guys you're watching aside from Smith?
Well, there's a couple interesting guys. Again, I think next year they could have 5 or 6 first-round picks. That is on the board, I think. For this year, you have Devin Smith. You have Michael Bennett, who I like. He's not a monster on the defensive line, but he has good feet. He's smart. I think he would be a good defensive tackle for teams. I'd take him in the second round. You see him projected second or third most teams. Duran Grant is a good cornerback. He's not quite the Bradley Roby level, but Duran Grant, I think it could be a starter for sure, or a third corner at the least in the NFL. And then Jeff Hireman at tight end has an NFL tight end body. He had injuries as a senior, but I think he's the prototypical guy that teams look for, and he blocks. He's a really good blocker. So I do think he could be a guy that teams might reach for a little bit because it's a little bit of a weak tight end class, it seems like, Chris. So I would not be surprised to see Hireman go higher than expected because he really does have the whole package.
And you bring up Hireman. Hey, the Browns here, they could use a tight end now, Doug. They lost Jordan Cameron this offseason. He's now in Miami, so I wouldn't rule out Hireman when it comes to the Browns.
No, I think everything Jordan Cameron did for the Browns, I absolutely think Jeff Hireman could do that too. Absolutely.
And he's not as injury prone either, obviously. That was one thing with Jordan Cameron. He didn't really stay on the field very well. Doug, earlier today, you had an interesting tweet about a franchise quarterback. I'm wondering where you kind of come down with the Browns moving up to get Marcus Mariota.
Get a quarterback is where I come down. Yeah, they are wasting. How many years has Joe Thomas been in the league? Is it 8 years? They have
since 2007.
Right?
Yep.
They have a prototypical left tackle who's never had anybody worth protecting. You do have pieces in place. I don't know what you're waiting for. People seem afraid to trade picks. Mm-hmm. Would you trade Mingo, Gilbert, and a pick to move up? That's what happens when you have a top 10 pick as the Browns, right? I mean, it's not like the Browns are turning these picks into gold. They have not made a decision to invest and go after quarterbacks in Tim Couch. Sitting around and waiting for a guy to fall to you at 22 is not the same thing. So, yeah, I don't think there's no price that's too steep to invest in a quarterback, because if you think about it, it's like they've traded 3 number 1 picks and a number 3 pick to get a quarterback in the last 8 years, because that's what they've wasted on quarterbacks who aren't worth it. So make a decision. It will change your franchise. I'm not 100% sold on Mariota, but I would respect the Browns for identifying a guy and saying we are doing whatever it takes to get him. It will change the franchise.
All right, Doug Maurice, you've elicited a number of reactions from the people here in the studio, both good and bad, with that. I'm with you. Go get Mariota. All right. Thanks, Doug.
All right, thanks, guys.
All right. Are you saying that Rob Hausler does not solve the Browns tight end problem?
How dare I, right?
Is that what you're getting at?
Mrs. Hausler's watching right now on cleveland.com. She's not happy with me. Yeah, I'm saying that. Absolutely, I'm saying that.
All right.
How many catches did he have last year in Arizona? 2? 4? I remember one time I recommended him as a fantasy sleeper, and I think he got injured the first play of the game or something along those lines. So, I mean, he's kind of like Jordan Cameron in that sense, Dan. He's athletic. He can run a little bit, but he hasn't shown that he can stay healthy, and he hasn't really been productive throughout his career. So, yeah, I would say that tight end is still on that wish list for Ray Farmer in Berea.
All right. That's fine. Rob Hausler is going to find you and, I don't know, do something.
By the way, when it comes to the number 2 pick, from ESPN's Bob Holtzman, he says reports are that the Eagles continuing to make a push for that number 2 spot.
Okay.
And the Chicago Bears have spoken with the Titans about number 2. They would be interested in sending Jay Cutler to Tennessee, but the Titans do not have an interest in that.
Ouch.
Maybe it's his body language. Maybe it's that big contract that he has. I don't know.
All right, we're going to have Mary Kay Cabot coming up, Terry Pluto coming up as well. We're going to take a very short break here. The stream should start back up for you. If it doesn't start back up in a couple minutes, scroll up there, hit the play button, and make sure you keep commenting. We are watching your comments as we go. I've already had to remove one of your comments. Come on, people. Step your game up in our comments section. We're going to take a quick break. We will be back in a minute.